Hi there, it's me, Brett Fish, and something that I've been thinking about a little bit for the last little while is this. Imagine that you're wearing a red shirt that is almost completely red, and yet it has a thin band of green down the middle. Now, if somebody came up to you and said, "I really like your red shirt," that would seem normal. But if somebody came to you and said, "I really like your green shirt," that would probably seem a little bit confusing because the shirt is mostly red. It's a red shirt, and yes, there is green on it, but it's a red shirt. And so the question is, why do we do the same when it comes to South Africa? Now, before we get more specifically into what I want to speak about today, there's something that I want to share that my friend Megan Furness said in an online conversation we were having about whiteness a few weeks ago that just blew my mind and really shouldn't have, but I just never thought about it before. And she was saying that before, during apartheid, the government used to use the majority of their resources to take care of 8% of the population of South Africa. The majority of the resources of South Africa were used to ensure the benefit and the goodwill and the comfort of 8% of the country's citizens, white people. So the majority of South Africa's resources went towards looking after white people. So you've got a government that takes everything it has and puts it towards 8% of the population. And then post 94, you've now got a government who's taking everything it has, the same amount of stuff, and suddenly they are trying to take care of 100% of the population of the country. That was mind-blowing to me. I'd never thought about it that way. We talk about corruption, we talk about how this present government has failed, and they definitely have in some ways, maybe many ways. But if we think of what they inherited, even if they were the best people trying to do the best things and with the best intentions at heart, they inherited a position where all the resources were being used for 8%. So all the systems and structures that were put in place to make sure that white people benefited from it. And now suddenly you've got the same systems and structures and you're trying to use them to benefit the whole of South Africa. So I think understanding that helps us realize just the context that we're in. And then the other day on the Twitter, I saw this video by Nsiki Mazwai, and she gave me permission to post it here. And this kind of speaks a little more clearly into this idea of South Africa as a black country. So let's listen to Nsiki.
Molweni, I don't have a problem Nabelungu creating their own spaces. Their DAs, their Highveld, their 702s. I'm fine with that because you are your own people and you've got your own nuances and things that you like that black people really can't relate to. And I think it's healthy for white people to have their own space. What I find toxic and unhealthy and racist is white people usurping mainstream platforms and thinking that they represent the majority. It makes no sense to me why a Stephen Curtis should be on SAFM in the morning. It makes no sense to me why Leanne Manners should be on Morning Live in the morning when this country is black dominated. And if they at least spoke one African language, then it would make it a bit easier. But for the fact that white people have usurped mainstream platforms that rightfully belong to the majority speaks a lot about white supremacy and white people thinking they're not racist when they actually are.
So Nsiki makes some valid points there, and I think this is worth us just really spending some time thinking on. I don't know if you like me, the idea of hearing South Africa as a black country doesn't sit well with me. There's if I'm honest, there's something that's like, oh. And to be fair, if you said South Africa is a white country, that wouldn't sit well with me at all. But going back to that example of the red shirt, South Africa is around 75% or more black. And we've spoken about this before, where, especially maybe in Cape Town where I stay, life can be managed in such a way as I can feel like I'm in a white country. The spaces I hang out in, the people that are in leadership, the people that run things, the people that I see in the manager positions, I can live a week and look back and feel like I've been in a white country. I don't very often feel like experientially I'm living in a country where I make up 8%, or people that look like me make up 8% of the population. It doesn't feel like that is true. And so that is true. And so we need to sit with that as white people. It might feel uncomfortable because we're used to being the majority in many of the spaces we sit in. But realizing in the greater context of the country, we are the minority. And so, as Ntiki was saying, how is it that in big spaces on TV, on radio, and this has been the whole representation in sport question, we expect white people to have prominent positions? We expect, if anything, we would be okay if rugby was 50% white, 50% black. And I think most people, or a lot of white people, would have issues with that already. But yet that's not equality. That is equality. It's not representation. And when the sport thing comes up, people often go, well, what about the soccer team? And the soccer team is, Bafana Bafana is one space where there is a true reflection most of the time of what South Africa looks like. One majority, 2 white people in a team of 11. And typically, I think what was super interesting for me back in the day when people used to pose that argument is that the white person used to be the captain and the white person used to be the goalkeeper most of the time, or a lot of the time, and those could be seen as 2 of the most important positions. And so again, even in those structures, whiteness still had a space. And so I think one thing we as white people need to do, I think one thing that will help us understand, kind of put all these videos and these conversations into perspective, is by finding spaces where we are the minority, where our being present there isn't going to be antagonistic towards other people, but where we can actually show up in minority spaces. And especially if it's places where the language is not our first language, that will encourage us to shut up, to be quiet, to listen more, to watch more, to see what it feels like to be part of a minority. It doesn't always feel cool, and maybe it depends how the majority treat you. And so if you are a minority black person in a white space, you've often been treated really badly. And if you are a minority white person in a black space, you will often be treated really well. You'll be given respect and honor that maybe you don't deserve in those spaces. And so you can't even compare those 2 things. You've got to look at how you're being treated by the majority. But I think if you're looking for practical suggestions, one of the things we need to do more of is find ourselves in minority spaces which actually reflect the country. So just sit with that idea as you leave this video, and maybe watch it again. Sit with the idea, South Africa is a black country. What does that do to you? Does that make you feel angry or confused or scared or weird in any way? Because it's the truth. We live in a black country, and if anything less than that, we live in a diverse, mixed country in which we, as white people, make up less than 8% of the people. And once we can start understanding that reality, once we can start reflecting that reality in our friendships, in our workspaces, in our places of entertainment and hobby and all those kind of things, then I think we're going to find greater unity, greater togetherness, greater belonging. And that is what ultimately we want to work towards. So I want to encourage you. It's going to be uncomfortable. This work is uncomfortable work, and that's okay. Just push into the uncomfortable. Spend time there and listen and learn. It's a beautiful country, and let's learn to be in it together in a way that feels good for everyone.